The thing to remember about comedy is if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny. So you got to get back from the pain. See what I mean?
So I'm currently sitting on this book, Texts of the Theory of Comedy. You know, perspectives on laughter and humor from some of the most significant thinkers across time. And I thought it would be an interesting idea to present these chapters one by one and see if I can actually become funny by trying to apply what they write about. So I think the way I will go about it is to allow myself one joke per chapter, and I will have to keep the series going until either I have presented all 26 chapters or I have made a joke that is genuinely funny.
In a few moments, he will have written the funniest joke in the world.
There are two major limitations that I see. The first one is I'm German, so
We Germans aren't all smiles and sunshine.
The second challenge, I would say, can be characterized with the phrase, there's nothing less funny than explaining a joke, but that's kind of the material I'm working with here, right? These texts are gonna be less like Carlin, Chappelle, Seinfeld, talking about how to be funny, and more like Aristotle, Kierkegaard, Kant, talking about what laughter reveals about the human condition. So I'm definitely skeptical about my abilities here, but let's see how it goes. So it's starting chronologically with Homer, and the text is a mixture of commentary and examples from his work. It does start kind of with a banger inside though, saying that comedy has basically two purposes. Firstly, it can be used to put someone in their place in the form of ridicule when they step too far outside of the norms of what is expected of them. But secondly, it can also be an act of transgression. Laughter can break decorum and change the way you look at the status quo. In Homer's Ilias, that happens, for example, in a scene where Zeus starts laughing at the other gods during a supposedly serious battle, by which he kind of flips the table, turning it into a joke. Man, I wish it had worked like that in the 20th century, you know? Just frickin' Zeus popping out of the clouds when the Nazis were seizing power and laughing about their old ass 80-year-old leather boots, you know? So yeah, Aristotle described comedy as a genre. For him, comedy is an imitation of flawed people in some regard. But rather than tragedy, where the flaws lead to, well, tragedy, despair and catharsis, comedy shouldn't lead to pain or pity, but rather just kind of laugh about these goofy people so you don't become like them as well. So in a way, it's one of the first expressions of the idea of comedy as bending the norms without breaking them. A pretty timeless idea that also relates to one of the more modern scientific theories of humor as benign violations of what is expected. The joke I had about that was about El Zozira, kind of the opposite of the good Aristotle, who, rather than always following the perfect mean, would always do one of the extremes. And not just any extreme, but the worst of the two extremes. So instead of being too shy to ask for extra food in a dinner party, they would just pin their forks into people's backs for an extra bowl of souvlakis, you know? So I read this one multiple times and I couldn't really make too much out of it. I think part of the reason is because he was talking about this satire play, aside from comedy and tragedy, which actually sounds really fun. So they would include these nasty sidekick characters into an otherwise serious story. But yeah, his attitude throughout this text is a bit of a grumpy one, saying that, yeah, vulgarity and cheap tricks, they belong in the carnival and not on stage. I think the main positive thing that he adds is to say that comedy and the satire play should be done in a playful, everyday language. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking playful, maybe someone who thinks everything is a play, you know? They want to be an actor. But all the more surprised they are that everyone tells them they are a magician. Why do you call me a magician? He asks his friend. Well, every time the curtain raises, you disappear. Then we have another short one, Opitz, who honestly I think he mainly got included because he's German. And he especially emphasizes what he calls the doctrine of decorum. The idea that comedy, because of its themes and language, was more suited to the common folk and shouldn't feature kings and noble people. Yeah, it is really interesting that this norm has been in place for so long, especially with it being basically completely inverted nowadays, right? Well, one of the reasons for that was less social mobility and the absence of democratic participation. So yeah, it just seems like the bigger themes were firmly in the hands of the aristocracy in that sense. But also the language itself was more stratified back then, with more regional dialects among the common folk, and the nobility having to learn Greek, Latin, and generally speaking a more courtly language. The political system probably also wasn't as suited for poking fun at the ruling class before freedom of expression became more of a common virtue. Though there is some interesting research being done about the uptick in memes and jokes from modern authoritarian regimes like Saudi Arabia, showing how humor can be used to maintain power by lending relatability and distracting from mistakes. So yeah, interesting article I will link down below. But yeah, I don't really have a joke about this one, so I will save one for later when I talk about Hegel or something, which gives me more material to joke about. Okay, so now we're in the 1700s with this Frenchman. And the cool thing that he emphasizes is the importance of understanding the psychology of the people you want to portray in your jokes. If you understand the different type of people you encounter, then you can kind of playfully portray them, as he says, paint them with colorful brushes while still accurately. And you set a much more relatable and engaging stage for comedy, right? Because people find themselves within it. There's more relevance to it. I also agree with what he says about trying to follow the laws of reason still within the plot of comedy. Because if the setting is right and if the characters are right, then you can just let it play out and it will work, you know? So yeah, really cool writer that I didn't know about before. His hottest take, though, is probably when he goes into how Molière, the famous French playwright, kind of fell off after a while. He stopped portraying accurately how people behave. I have to agree with that assessment, because actually the effect of Molière was way bigger than even he anticipated. Because, you know, the natural human progression, Molière found out his structure worked, and then he forgot the other elements. So it became more and more structure, more and more abstract, more and more mathematical, his plays. And that worked for the audience, that he kind of eased into his style. But then once other people from other countries started listening to his plays, they really detested that. And they became racist. And that's actually why we had the Dark Ages. Because they became racist against math. Okay, we come to the grand conclusion now. My comedy show in front of my friend who I have told about this YouTube channel. So, are you excited about my comedy routine?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, that's good. So the mood was getting there, but in terms of actually being funny, it did definitely get off to a pretty lousy start. I don't know, the moment of Zeus popping out of the clouds, it was the only one I had laughed about while writing. That must have kind of gotten into my head or something, because I stumbled in my delivery and repeated the moment leading up to it like 3 times. Zeus would just kind of pop. Oh, come on. Sorry, I can't. I have to try again. And it didn't land either way, so yeah. So yeah. Thank you for listening. Do you want to rate the joke out of 10 perhaps?
Maybe I will give you a 7.
A 7? Okay. Thank you, that sounded like a 7. Okay. For the second joke with Aristotle, though I didn't get a laugh either, at least she did appreciate learning about the Greek dish that I mentioned in my attempt to make things funnier by being hyper-specific.
Well, I learned about souflakas.
But honestly, I'm pretty okay with this type of result. Yeah, as long as you're entertained and learn something, that's all I can hope for realistically. The third joke with the magician, well, let's just say it took some explaining at the end of what was even supposed to be funny about it in the first place. And that's why we think you're a magician.
But why did he disappear? Because he got really into his characters.
Yeah, because like actors always, they have, when the curtain closes, then they go behind the curtain, you know?
Ah.
It doesn't make perfect sense because like they don't disappear, they just go behind the curtain. But something interesting happened with my final joke about Molière. Right from the start, I felt kind of more aligned with its structure and emotional beats. It becomes self-enforcing, you know? People start to be like, okay, I just have to stick to this structure. I think there was just something about it that just kind of agreed with me and the type of stories I would sometimes make up anyway. And what would you say when it came to the final punchline? This is what happened. But they became racist against math and against science. So, yeah, that's how the Dark Ages happened. And
Why racist against math and science? Yeah, I thought it was funny that you used the word racist for science and math.
nice, baby. I knew that. I was confident in this one. Nice. That is amazing, actually. As you can see, I was quite over the moon with that.
It was fun. Thank you, Simon.
And despite her not laughing at every single joke, you know, at the end of the day, just being able to lighten up the mood of my friends, isn't that all what really matters? That being said, it would be great if I managed to make a genuinely hilarious joke later on in the series. And we still have so many interesting thinkers to go through as well. So like and subscribe if you want to see me do more of these videos. Otherwise I'm gonna do some YouTube drama. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.